So our church is doing ministry to the homeless through PADS ministry, and PADS is the ministry where you go, and we once a month would go to this church, and we would serve dinner to the homeless folks, and then we would stay overnight with them, and then we would serve breakfast with them. And basically, through the course of doing that for several months last summer, we got to know several of the homeless people that were there. In fact, it really was interesting because they humanized them in many ways. They became people that we actually talked with, and you got to know their names. One such person, my wife particularly got to know, was Bridget. Bridget was a 62-year-old woman who Pam struck up a friendship with, and they would talk every month at length when they were at the PADS shelter. And eventually Pam kind of said, can we invite Bridget to stay in our house for one night a week? I said, sure, I think that'd be good. So Bridget gets invited, and she comes and stays at our house and starts staying a couple nights a week. And so one day, now Bridget, you have to understand Bridget a little bit. Bridget's kind of this person who, she says angels talk to her, and she hears a lot of things, and sometimes she's a little crazy. I mean, one day she was in my driveway kind of doing this, so I'm going, my neighbors, but Bridget became an interesting person because she's not only a little different, but she's actually quite prophetic. So one day she's in our kitchen, and Pam and I are in there. We're both running around like chickens with our head cut off. We're just going nuts. Both of us on 2 different phones, shuffling papers, doing all this stuff. It's complete mayhem, just constant motion. Typical suburban living, as we all do it in suburbia. And Bridget's standing in the doorway. She's just kind of standing there, and she's watching us back and forth. And I'm thinking, what is this lady doing? All of a sudden she walks up to my wife. She grabs her by the face, and she says, "How can you hear the voice of God when you never stand still?" I thought, whoa, that's prophetic. My wife and I talked later. Pam said, actually after she said it to me, I realized I hadn't stopped that day. I hadn't stopped the day before, the day before. When do I ever stop? Running around like a lunatic. And she's totally right. How can you possibly hear God's voice when it says specifically in the Bible, be still and know that I am God? I guess when I thought about my life, I realized, wow, when do we ever stop? When do we ever cease? When do we ever just quit? When do we ever just sit still and listen for God's voice? Hardly ever. So Bridget taught me a great lesson that day about just what it meant to hear God and what it took to hear God.